Hey folks, Quilly here, and welcome to another episode in our Unity base building game series, codenamed Project Porcupine. In our last episode, we'd started implementing, I'm doing air quotes here, implementing these oxygen generators. But really, it's not about implementing the oxygen generator behavior themselves, as it is dealing with an object that was more than one tile, which we have in there now. The actual job graphic gets sort of put in there and in the right position, and then someone goes and builds it. But what we are lacking is the user interface feedback for when this is selected, and then we're mousing around, it's not showing us a preview of where that is. And it never has done that at any point. Now, for a lot of things, that was sort of fine. I mean, sort of for the floor, you almost sort of don't expect it to necessarily have that preview, although it might be nice if you did that. But for all the furniture, it would be really nice if it sort of had a little graphic wherever your mouse was that showed you what tile that it was going to spawn in. And in particular, with walls, we're quite happy with being able to drag out a section here that all builds walls, for example, but it really doesn't make any sense with some objects, especially objects that are larger than 1 by 1. The system does correctly sort of bail if you're trying to install furniture where there's already some furniture. And the reason we're moving so slowly here is because the movement cost of moving through one of the oxygen generators is quite high. So it's not going to, in the end, overlap the actual furniture, but it does right now accept overlapping furniture jobs, which is obviously not good. And really, with something like oxygen generators, I think it's fine for us to say, you can't click and drag them. It's not that sort of thing. Maybe later we'll find some other way to do it, but really I think what we want to do is enforce sort of one at a time construction for these things. And it would be nice if we had a little preview going on of where those things will go. So that's what we're going to work on here. So, couple of things. We're probably, I suspect, I don't know this for sure, I suspect we will be working in 3 scripts over here. We've got our mouse controller script, which is what interacts with the mouse. It responds to mouse clicking, it reports dragging behavior and all those sorts of things, and what it does when you complete a drag. So when you start clicking and then you release it somewhere else and you complete a drag, it then tells the build mode controller that here's the area, or actually it doesn't give it the area. What it does is when you're dragging, it keeps track of where you started your drag and where you're ending your drag, and for each one of those tiles within that, it calls, in our build mode controller, it says do build. It gives it the tile, so it loops through each of the tiles that were dragged, and it will call do build on each one of those, and there you go. And then once the build mode controller, so the do build mostly just queues a job, sets up a job for something it built, and the job sprite controller is responsible for giving us that transparent green image of the build, which it does by taking the same graphic that you would normally use for furniture, except it just colorizes it. It tints it green, so it lowers the red and the blue, but keeps the green at 100%, and it gives it 25% alpha, so it's only 25% visible, or rather, it's 75% transparent. So we get a transparent green preview version of the furniture while it's on the job queue. So I think what would be a reasonable thing for a little user interface is if we click, say, Build O2 Generator, and then we're mousing around here, I think it would be good to have that green preview version of the job sort of attached to your mouse. I think that would be all right. Maybe we could colorize it something else, but I think it might be nice if you sort of mouse in a position where you can't build something. Like if I was, over this wall in some amount of way, I think it would be reasonable for what? For either it to not appear at all, or maybe to still appear but be in red. I think I kind of like that second version of it being in red. It makes it more explicit that there is something attached to your mouse, but you can't build it here. For all the cases where you click it and then sort of immediately move over here and you're like, oh, nothing's going on. Well, it's because it's invalid. So I think what we want is a red version when you're mousing over something that can't support the building, and green otherwise, and then as soon as you click down, then it stays there as green form. I don't know, maybe it should be yellow? Should it look different? Well, this is such an irrelevant thing to worry about, but should it look different when it's attached to your mouse and in a valid location versus when you actually queue up the job? Maybe, but you know what, we can play around with that tint and tweakness and visibility of things a million times later on. So basically, when we actually have something set in build mode control over here, we kind of want, what do we want? I'm wondering about just rewriting the mouse controller completely. Because other than, say, walls and floors, we really don't care about the do dragging. I guess it's fine. So I guess step 1 let's not worry about the dragging for now. Step 1, let's have a graphic that's attached to the mouse. So when a build mode gets set, I guess that's a good way to saying it, is let's say while build mode is objects is true, then during, and we don't have an update function here, right? So in our build mode controller, let's have an update that says if build mode is objects equals true, and this should always be the case, and build mode object type is not equal to null and not equal to blank. Sure, something like that. So if all these things are true, then show a transparent preview of the object that is color coded. Actually, I spell color that way, but we'll do it that way because that's how it's written in Unity code. That is color coded based on whether or not you can actually build the object here, right? Okay, so that's good. So that's what's going to happen in the update over here. So really, we're going to need some sort of sprite that is going to have to be set to the correct furniture and so on and so forth. And again, I think there's going to be some code duplication, which doesn't make me too happy. But basically, we're going to be doing exactly what the job sprite controller is doing over here. Yeah, that's a little unhappy making. That being said, I don't think there's a way to separate. I mean, there might be a way to, like, you know, generalize this little bit or something like that. But almost all the other code in here is dependent on there being a job and using that to read a position. I mean, you can make a generic sort of put sprite at this world coordinate kind of function, which I guess would be okay. I think because we don't have it, I'm going to go and write it. I might try to do some sort of generic writing over here, and then maybe we can use that somewhere else. But in theory, we have some sort of function that says show sprite at coordinate, like this. And it needs a string, which is the, I don't know, it's sort of show furniture sprite. Furniture sprite. So string is the furniture type. And is it add coordinate, or can we just pass it a tile? I guess we could pass it a tile. That's fine. At tile t. So in our build mode controller, I think what we're going to do is we're going to keep a reference to our furniture sort of preview, like cursor image. It's really what it is. It's sort of like the furniture preview that's attached to the cursor. I don't know, I'll call it furniture preview. We'll call it like that. And it can start off being perfectly null. That's okay. So first we're going to say if the furniture preview is equal to null. If we haven't done this yet, then let's go and set one up. And all we're going to do is we're going to create a new game object. We're going to set the furniture preview dot set, or that transform dot set parent. Typical this. We'll keep it nested within ourselves. Keeps things nice and clean. I like that. Then we have to set the position based on the tile. But we don't have to do that here. So this is the initial setup. Oh, it would need a component. So add component. It needs a sprite renderer. And I think at that point it's probably set up. Okay, so mostly we only have to do that once. And I suppose we could do that in start. Does it really matter? I guess not. I guess it's fine to do it in start. So we'll do that, and then we'll say, we'll set it inactive though. Dot set active false. There we go. Well, I guess it'll never be null. Well, it'll never not be null in start, so we don't have to check that. All right, so we create it on the fly, which is really cool. We don't have to like pre-create it and then, you know, link it over here. We just create a dummy game object. Doesn't have to be copied from a prefab. There's nothing to it. It's just got a sprite renderer. Done. Does it ignore mouse clicks or do anything like that? I don't think that matters. We'll deal with that later if we need to, but I don't think that's a thing that matters. Okay. So we set up the sprite renderer. Excellent. So show furniture sprite at tile. So what we need to do is we need to say, first of all, this presumably will have to be set active. And we want to get the sprite. And what we're going to do is we're going to use furniture sprite controller.get sprite for furniture. Yeah, we're going to keep a reference there. I mean, that's fine, because what we need to do is get the sprites, and that's how we're getting them. So again, code duplication, doing the same thing in two different places makes me unhappy, because if you have to update things later on, but it's pretty minimal. We just trying to grab a reference to something that's in the world. That's not too bad. It's probably okay. And again over here, so we're going to want to, we don't have to add a component, we just have to get the sprite renderer. So our furniture preview, we are doing a get component of the sprite render, which is fine. Get furniture sprite, well, we have the furniture type we're going to get passed. We make sure it's got a color and make sure it's on a sorting layer, which it should already have, actually. Which I think I could do here, because this returns the sprite renderer, so I could set it to the correct layer at that point. And right now the color will get set green, but we're going to change this based on whether it's valid placement or not. Right now we only want it to work. So the last thing I think we have to do is say .transform is equal to the new vector 3, where, just like here, the xy coordinates of the object. Let me grab this piece of code here. We're going to set it, but there's going to have to be a bit of an offset. So it's the t.x, t.y, and furniture proto is equal to tile.world.furniture prototypes of type furniture type, like that. And then we can say proto. So this little placeholder, so this should work fine, but all we have to do is make sure to call this every update with the correct furniture type and the tile that is under the mouse for now. That's what we're going to start with. So yeah, that'll work okay. Let's give that a try. So show furniture sprite at tile. And this is starting to look like something that's a little bit more of a generic function that maybe we can move somewhere else. But for now, we're just going to keep it within here, and that's going to be fine. So for furniture sprite at tile, we need to know the tile that's under the mouse, which I think the mouse controller can tell us, right? Yeah, get the mouse over tile, or get tile under the mouse is another way to think about it. But we, I guess, can hold on to a reference. I mean, maybe mouse controller should be calling this, but I kind of like it to be here. So we'll do mouse controller, mouse controller. I think I have FSC here. I don't usually use acronyms, but it's such a long name. I think that's why I did that. But let's go and use my more typical convention over here. So we'll find the instance of mouse controller, grab a copy of this, because then we can say, so our furniture type we know, because it's actually build mode object type. And then the position is mouse controller get mouse over tile. So this will just return the tile that our mouse is over. So we say show furniture sprite at tile if we've got one selected. Let's fix the syntax errors. There's an overload method. Oh. Set parent needs a transform, not a game object. And we can't assign, right, transform dot position is what we're setting. All right, hit play. Load the pathfinding test. So if I hit build O2 generator, it's now attached to the mouse. So right now, it's we're positioning things based on their position on the bottom left tile. Now I don't know if that's what we want, but it is there. And right now we're not color coding it based on position. If I click here, it actually doesn't let us set up the object. If I click here, it does. And actually, that was quite interesting, because the alphas sort of multiply. Looks a little bit different, but I guess, I don't know, that's kind of fine. Now, we still do the click and drag, which obviously is not good. So I think we're going to want to change, some sort of something with the behavior with what tile, how we actually decide what tile is the tile for a multi-tile object, so that maybe it's, because imagine we have like a big 3x3 object, and it still feels like it's linked to the bottom left corner, and maybe we'd want the center tile to do it, or something like that. We can put in some sort of offset, but for now it's working, which is good. So with the dragging, what do we want to do? So we have this update dragging function, which is all where it's happening. And we move the start and end position and all those things. I'm just wondering, like, do we want to do something like, if object type not draggable, or something like that, draggable, then what we do is we just set the start position to be equal to the current position. Right? So let's, just for the sake of argument, let's set this to be true. So object type not draggable is true for all the things. So for all the things, we just keep setting the start position of the drag to be equal to the current position of the drag. So we're always, quote unquote, dragging only on the single tile. So if I do that, I say pathfinding test, O2 generator, and I click and drag, and you can see it's only letting us drag. Effectively, we're dragging one tile all the time, and if I release, it builds there. So that's good, but I would still like to be able to click and drag a wall instead of just having a single wall at the end. So how do we determine if the object type is draggable or not? Should that just be a trait of, like, the furniture prototype or whatever? I mean, dragability of something is kind of, sort of, just a user interface thing. So I want to try to avoid inserting all this stuff into the data. On the other hand, the game data is the sort of thing we're going to read from an XML file, and wouldn't it be nice for people who are modding things and setting things in the XML file to be able to define if, like, yeah, this is the sort of thing you should be able to drag and drop. I mean, maybe the dragability is just determined if something's a 1x1. That's actually not too bad. What if we do something like, is object draggable? And we do that by finding out if the object type is a furniture that's 1x1. If it's a 1x1 furniture, we say yes. Otherwise, we say no. I guess it's a Boolean. Actually, that may be something that belongs to build mode controller, because that actually has access to all the stuff. So let's make it a public bool here that responds with, is your current object type draggable? Well, we want to get a copy of the furniture prototype. Well, first of all, I guess if there is one. So first, if build mode is object is equal to false, then floors are draggable. So then we return true. Done. But at this point, we know we've got a furniture prototype, so that's going to be okay. Do we have access to the world at this point? Right, like this is pretty fast, right? Because we don't have to do a find, so that's okay. So I can say something like world controller.instance.world.furniture prototypes for this furniture for our current build mode type, like that. So return proto.width equals 1 and proto.height equals 1. So if this evaluates to true, so if the width and height is equal to 1, then this will return true, and therefore you can drag this object. Otherwise it returns false, and you can't. Okay, I like that. So now in our mouse controller, we are not going to make the is object draggable here. Instead, and we're going to get rid of this Boolean. Instead over here, we're going to call for our build mode controller, which... Ooh, yeah, that's not great. We're going to keep that around. So, just going to find this one time. Like that. Like that. There we go. Remove this. There we go. So we only find the build mode controller once on start. And then... here. Build mode controller dot is object draggable. If it's false. If it's not a draggable object, then we reset the drag position every frame. Okay, let's give that a go. Pathfinding test. So first I'm going to try to build a floor. This should be draggable because it's not furniture, and it is. Build a wall should be draggable because it's 1 by 1. It is. It can't be worked right now because we don't have any stockpiles. Because they only show up when we load. Actually, I suppose I could do that. There you go. Load this build. So again, build the walls. They get built, and that's fine. Now our O2 generator is not draggable. So as soon as I release, it'll just build the 1. Stockpiles are draggable because they're 1 by 1. Awesome. And we have a little bit of a preview. I'm still thinking there's going to be room to mess around with the placement of this, like where it gets sort of linked, because you can clearly see wherever our mouse is always going to be considered the bottom left corner of this, which may or may not be what we want. I don't know. Okay, let's go and do the last bit, where this should turn presumably red in this position, because you clearly cannot build this here. It doesn't let us build it, but it still shows up as green. So that should be pretty easy, because build mode controller, do you call validate? Is furniture placement valid? Excellent. So what we want to do is show furniture sprite at tile. We've got the furniture sprite, or the furniture type, and we've got the tile. So if the placement is valid, then we colorize it green. Otherwise, we are going to colorize it red. So we're going to keep the red portion at 100%, and we'll go half green. My God, my typing ability today is basically non-existent. Play. Pathfinding test. O2 generator. Holy crap, it works. Well, that was easy. Red, green, red, green, red, green. Red, because there's no floor. Green. Character doesn't get bothered by it. Well, there we are. That went surprisingly well. Again, I'm a little bit worried about code duplication, and, you know, we're doing a few of the sprite stuff in a couple of different places, and there's probably a way to generalize it. But holy snot, this works, that works pretty well. And what a huge improvement to the little user interface thing, which is, I mean, important in general, but especially useful for multi-tile object over here. And with the wall, we've got the little preview that follows as well, which is really nice. The door, we got the little preview there. Does it flip over? It doesn't flip over until you place it down. Although that's pretty common in a lot of games as well. Excellent! You can't really tell the green versus red tint over here because the brown doesn't really tint very well. So that's going to be something to keep in mind going forward. I mean, I'm wondering if it would be better to... I'm not sure. I was going to say something about... you change the tint color or whatever. It's almost like you don't want to tint. What you want to do, and you'd have to do this in the shader, is set every pixel that's not like a 0 pixel, right? So basically the silhouette. That's what you want. You want a silhouette of whatever the object is. So the pixels that are blank in the sprite, keep them blank. But the pixels that are not blank, you want them to be set to fully green or fully red, as opposed to just tinting the existing stuff. Because because the problem is this: if you're building whatever object it is, if the object you're building is naturally already red or naturally already green, or in fact you can see the blue O here, it still definitely looks blue in both things. But if the object itself is naturally green or naturally red, when you try to tint it, depending on how it is, one of those two versions of the tint it's not gonna be obvious what the effect is. And I think on the other version, is it gonna turn completely black, which would look weird. So I think we might end up doing a custom shader for that, which would be trivial. If you guys haven't seen it already, do check out my shader tutorial. In that one of the things we do is I do a demonstration of an overlay effect for like a red effect. I don't know if I included that in the final version, now that I think about it. But yeah, we can do some really good little shader effects for this build mode later on, rather than do the tinting, and that's certainly what we will do. But for now, I gotta say, I mean, this is pretty good. It's like 99% of the functionality we want there to show if you can build a tile in a particular position. Still got a weird little dot that shows up when you held it down, but that's okay. Currently, we don't have a way to cancel the build. Once I've left-click down, I can't really cancel it, other than, I mean, if I drag it somewhere invalid and let go, then it doesn't get built, but otherwise, I can't do anything about it. So, I think a lot of games, you can, if you can hit escape at this point, it'll sort of cancel it, because it only gets built when you release the mouse, right? That's what's important. And, I mean, I guess we could change it. I don't know. We'll see. That's minute things for later on that we will worry about then. But there we go. I don't know what the next one will be. Maybe, I guess we'll probably keep working on the oxygen generators and have them actually, you know, generate oxygen and then figure out what that means later on. Thanks for watching, folks. See you next time. Thank you everyone who pledged on Patreon in April and who are supporting these videos from May through to early June. And to these Mic Check level supporters, we've got Wes Oldenboiving, Craig Mortel, Neil Balaki Milner, Speedy Savant, Valiant Cake Fiend, Aaron Toivson, Marius Field Vold, Jan Torre Vel, Julian Auger Lafont, Steven Stager, Michael McClintock, Kale the Quick, Drazion, Bite Rash, Adjective, Jason Yanti, and to absolutely everyone who watches and shares and favorites and subscribes to these videos. Appreciate you all. Thank you very so much, and I'll see you next time.